Hello and welcome to the Grandin Podcast. First Draft Films from Indie to Hollywood. Today we have a very special guest, Jared Bauer. Jerry?
Jerry,
I said
it is.
Jared. We already had Jerry.
You can call me Jerry if you want to.
Nah, that'll be confusing.
Yeah, this is a very special podcast because we're going to kind of skip over our normal, what are we watching, what are we doing, quick
The
fact
small stuff.
the small stuff, and get straight to the point because this is a very cool topic. We are discussing with Jared the moral imagination. So Jared, why don't we just dive in and you just tell us a little bit about what the moral imagination is.
So just working with the simple definition, there are a guy named Edmund Burke and a guy named Kirk, not the captain. They proposed these ideas, and it really gained some popularity. At least the idea did around the French Revolution. But in our modern world, if you like, I find that the easiest way to describe it would be to imagine a funnel, a three-dimensional funnel, and let's say that the immoral imagination, which everyone has a very easy idea wrapping their mind around. The immoral imagination exists at the bottom of that funnel, if you like. And then at the top of that funnel, kind of spinning up into a plethora of examples, you have the moral imagination. And the moral imagination is very different from a hoping or grasping for a utopia, necessarily. The moral imagination is based in gratitude, and the immoral imagination is constantly looking to gratify lust. Mm-hmm. So if you speak to self-gratification as opposed to self-denial and as a form of savoring life, then you're looking to, some would say, two opposite ends of a spectrum, if you like. But I don't necessarily see it that way. I do see it more as a funnel. So a lot of folks that wind up at the very bottom of the most debased human function is like human sacrifice would be immoral. I'm doing this as an act of rebellion for self-gratification or in order to acquire power or whatever you like. Snuff films are a good example of that. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be explicit for your audience. Hallelujah.
That is okay.
That's ammunition. Skin off your nose. That's easy for a human being to imagine, and C.S. Lewis talks about this a lot in Preface to Paradise Lost. He says that human beings have an easier time imagining Lucifer than imagining Michael, the Archangel Michael, and a lot of that has to do with our own fallen nature. So we can get along with and we can imagine how someone can be worse than ourselves, but we have a hard time imagining what motivates an angel. That's not smarmy or annoying or untenable, if you like. And so you see that a lot, let's say, in a lot of the Western art forms, especially in the last 30 years. In America, the primary art expression is video. And what you see in that is that the demonic gets an outsized amount of attention. And they're always made to be cool. They're always made to be super powerful. And there's always a willingness to appropriate Catholic or biblical themes. But they don't want to concede the power that exists in Christianity because it'll just nuke it too easily. And they don't like that. So you have Lucifer himself painted as an anti-villain or an anti-hero, instead of a narcissist, just a plain old-fashioned Lord of the Flies, a peeping Tom, little more than a peeping Tom. And to treat him with derision is more biblical than to treat him with envy, which seems to be the typical cultural response. So taking that as a type, the question of the moral imagination is related to me personally kind of seeking out ways to inspire something that goes that direction instead of that direction. Now, if you have an easy time imagining something crass or something worse than yourself that you could still find gratifying, right? why is it so hard for young people to imagine something outside of themselves that can be even more delightful? And so that's where poetry comes in. That's where a lot of experiential education comes in. So I call it experiential education. It's probably not the extremely most correctal thing to call it. I would say a lot of what I've attempted to do is to suggest that there are things of beauty that we can relish and savor, and do so honorably. That has nothing to do with some immoral self-gratification. So there's a difference between things that are, the word is edifying. There are things that are edifying to your soul, and there are things that are gratifying to your soul. And painting a picture kind of where we're going to go from there involves saying, all right, here is the differences between male and female, which right now the culture is attempting to make women ugly and make men beautiful, and then to pretend a bunch of lies that are just patently absurd. And so one of the things that we can do if we want to, and I say we in reference to people within a community can choose to accentuate the differences between men and women, and to really explore that from a biblical worldview without any attempt whatsoever to make peace with the immoral imagination. So as an example of that, the banquet and ball is a good example of that, of something that we put together in order to accentuate the female perspective. So the male-female perspective on this. So let me give you an example of this. The women never dress the same. There's no uniform for the women, but all the men are wearing tuxes. There's one example. Yeah. Another example is it's astounding how many women will come to the banquet and ball, and then they'll put on a ball gown, they'll do their hair, and they'll assume a different mental state. Let's not get spiritual about this, just a different mental state. And by being announced at the top of the stairwell and then going down that, something shifts. I'm not saying it changes. There's not a transformation. It's not magic. But something shifts just enough that men will often not recognize people they've known for a year or two. So a woman will come through, and then the men will just actually not recognize that person because they look different. They look so different, and they behave differently. So just their carriage, they haven't said anything, but they're surprised when they see them. So a couple of examples of this. The first couple of examples of this was Sarah Youngward at the time. She's Sarah Beard now. And then Annalisa Emmel. So people were
now
surprised.
Now
Annalisa Myers. So people didn't recognize her when she came down. They didn't know who that was. In Annalisa's case, they took her glasses away and she did her hair, and she carried herself differently. She wore a ball gown and so on. And whereas she was deliberately mousy and hiding out in a corner because of social anxiety, that had changed. So, yeah, that's my son, Ethan.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a great pausing point. Kate, you've been to a banquet and ball. I have not. Do you think you can share any insights into that mental state, as Jared called it, when you get into that ball gown and hair and makeup and all of
that? The term used is called wearing the ball gown, and essentially it's and for men wearing the tux, and I can't speak as much to that, but for wearing the ball gown is kind of like putting on your highest self. If you're thinking biblically, there's the old self and the new self. It's not entirely that, but it can be related to that. If you're wearing the ball gown, if you're intentionally putting yourself into your highest self mindset, and if you're doing that, and if you're thinking intentionally that every day, the ball gown is just like a very tactile, tangible way to think of that. So even if you're out and about in regular life, you can think back to that, and then remembering what that was like, remembering that mental state, then you can intentionally put yourself back into that mental state. And for me, that has been banquet of ball is my favorite time of the year. Like, I was really sad that we didn't have the one this last year, but anyways, so it's the thing I look forward to the most, and the thing I treasure the most, and not well, not the thing, but the event I treasure the most. So,
Okay, but you say you treasure it the most. I'm going to contrast this with, say, why not Christmas? Christmas is hard to beat. So, without saying, well, I hate my family or something.
which I don't.
Yeah, you do. You named Gran and film, but and never mind. So if you're saying I like this better than Christmas, how dare you? But seriously, why? What is this thing you're talking about?
We only have a limited amount of time. Are we going to spend the whole time talking about Banquet and Ball is my question.
Give us one thing that about Banquet and Ball, about this putting on the ball gown, that you think elevates it above putting on a dress at Christmas.
Well, because at Christmas, everybody knows what Christmas is. Most people, I would say, in modern society, know what Christmas is. You know what are the emotions associated with Christmas. You know what are the stock phrases, if you will, of Christmas.
Well, it's funny how we wound up having to use Lewis. Yeah,
Of course.
These stock phrases that we find ourselves using because one of them, and if we were going to reference the 4 types of love here, there's a familial love that is a familiar love that is your warm blanket that you've had, your favorite book that's all worn in, and that's, for Christmas, a lot of it is family.
And that's storge, right?
That's
in the Greek.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what we found was, storge is a huge part of American culture, thank God, although there is a war against it. There is definitely a culture war that is targeted it and seeks to sweep the leg. But at the same time, something that we've kind of lost along the way is this idea of brotherly love. And the brotherly love is brothers in arms kind of love, like you just finished a hard fought battle, or you have something in common that you both loved or fought or are interested in or whatever, and you put your feet up by the fire and you got a drink at your elbow and you're going to discuss it with your friend. You're not looking into each other's eyes like Eros kind of love, but rather, and it's not this familiar love, but rather it's the kind of love that involves looking outward in the same direction and cooperating towards a goal and accelerating that, and then bringing in the Christ dynamic is this leaven, right? That this virus that infects what you're doing with something that transcends their broken selves. So a lot of folks that come through might be drug addicts, sex addicts, or just have a thundering amount of shame in their lives, or they don't have any self-awareness whatsoever. And we have the capacity to love those individuals and not be scandalized by the fact that they are putting on a tux when, yes, you were the Marquis de Sade, 6 months ago. But right now we're going to step into this and we're going to imagine something different. We're going to step into this imagination of tasting something morally superior. And it's like a very, I would compare it to a 40-year port.
You would.
It is dynamic. It is soothing. It is savory. And after you have it, you're like, that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. And that tends to be the response. It's like, oh, this is the way it should be. And I'm like, well, yeah. And they're like, every day should be Banquet and Ball. And I'm like, no, false. But it is one way that you can choose to start seeing each other differently. And this speaks to the issue of mythology, which has to do with the moral imagination as well. So in the human experience, you have to tell a story about a thing. That's who you are. It's inescapable. So the compilation of those stories essentially creates a trajectory or momentum for the greater story, which we'll call the myth. So when we say that the mythology of a community is linked to its collective experiences, we mean, what are the stories people tell when they get back together? Okay, I remember that. You'll will have noticed by now that people won't shut up about the Banquet and Ball. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. Because that's a collective experience. And so in order to have a conversation with people within the community, there are certain touchstones and reference points. Another big part of what we do is marriage. Marriage is a big part of what we do. So the marriage ceremony itself is something of a touchstone for people. There's a bachelor party beforehand where we do things that I can't discuss on camera. And then there are things that we do that are just kind of hey, remember all of the battles that we fought back in the day? Let's get back together and reconnect and talk and discuss kind of what we're doing within the community now. And that was what we recently did with it. LongCon is experimenting with that. We got a long ways to go with that one, but
It was still awesome.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
glad you enjoyed yourself because you got up and left during the podcast, so I wasn't sure.
Oh my gosh, don't even. I have responsibilities.
It sounds like these experiences, especially the banquet and ball and this whole moral imagination, require a kind of a mindset shift on everyone's part to just put away the things of the world, the things of culture, and just focus on the simplicity of human existence and God and Christ and the wholeness of just being.
Well,
And that's harder to do than to
yeah.
go to the immoral imagination.
Yeah, there is. There are certain vagaries that are involved when we're discussing these highfalutin mumbo jumbo to reference Anne. But what you have to do is then transfer it into something practical. So let's talk about the practical experience of the moral as opposed to the immoral imagination. I'm of the opinion that men should ask women to dance. Right. That is not normal. If you've grown up in the Lindy scene, women ask men to dance a lot. A lot. In fact, women do most of the asking. So we created a culture in the dance syndicates where men ask women to dance, period. And then we allow women to ask men to dance. And you know what we found was after the culture was men sticking their neck out there to ask women to dance all the time, when it was women's turn to ask men to dance, they didn't like it so much.
Yep.
They did not like it so much. And then they would go to a different dance in a completely different culture, and they're like, I don't like it. They're doing it wrong. And I'm like, well, right and wrong? Is that how we're framing everything now? This is right way, and there's a wrong. No, they're approaching it saying part of their experience of dancing was men behaving like men and women behaving like women, and it was a very countercultural message because we were asserting that one has responsibility to the other to behave within a certain expectation or a set of guardrails. So to give you an example of a scandalous story is I had two women and a man show up to one of my dances. This was some time ago, and I think I told you this before, but in case I haven't. The two girls had dressed in a very dumpy way, a big, clunky knit sweater that was like stretched out and ill-fitting. It was like drab olive green, and then they, a beanie hat that was stained like by food, not by purpose. Glasses that she should not have been wearing, and then these like baggy yoga pants. Weird.
That does not sound
doesn't sound
good.
right, does it?
No.
And then the other had on a similar cotton flare thing at the bottom, and a hoodie. And if they were wearing makeup, I couldn't tell. And then, but the man that came with them had probably spent 8 hours. Well, I don't know that, maybe 6 hours on his makeup, and hair, and nails, and he'd shopped around for that dress, and it looked like he'd had it altered so that he could eliminate the bust. And
I actually have not heard this story.
Yeah.
I've heard of this story, but this is my first time hearing the details thereof.
Right. So he came. So he came into the dance, and the two girls came to the dance, and we said, "Okay, guys on one side, girls on the other." And he bebopped over to the girls' side, and I said, and there was a dance, and he didn't get asked to dance, and so that happened, and then and then he was breaking the rules because guys are supposed to be on one side and girls are supposed to be on the other. He knew he was breaking the rules. He wanted to see what I would do. So I called him over and his two supportive friends who were girls. And we went outside and I said, look, here's my problem. You're going to kill my dance. Because guys are going to find out that this is a drag show and all these young men are going to stop attending. And I said, I don't know why you're doing this to me. Why, did I ever do something to you to deserve this? And he was sort of blissful about it. I like, didn't really have much to say. But the girls were highly offended and incensed and defensive and carrying on about this. And I said, listen.
On his behalf?
On his behalf. Now, I've seen this effect many, many times. And I don't completely understand the white knights that are these women. So I addressed the women. I said, It doesn't matter how hard he tries. He will never be as beautiful as you are. And look at how you dress. I said, if you want to help me, you spend as much time as he did on your appearance. And they got really uncomfortable with that. Well, I this, that, and I don't know. I'm like, it doesn't matter what, like, you think that you're overweight, or you think you're not as pretty, or you think you're, whatever it is you think, I guarantee you, the guys in there don't agree. Pointing at the dance, like, we don't agree. And then I said, look, you can go home and you can change your clothes or whatever. But we don't actually have a dress code here. But you will stand on the man's side. So we can go back inside as dressed like a woman, but you will stand on the man's side and ask girls to dance. Because that's our code. We're not going to change the rules. So we go back inside and he stands on the guy's side. And the girls standing on the girls' side, and the girls got asked to dance, and they had a nice time, turns out. And then I never saw him again. And the guy who was dressed like a girl would go ask girls to dance, and some of them turned him down. So he wound up asking the girls who were supportive of him, who looked like dudes, to dance with him. Now, this is topsy-turvy, and oh no, they're going to say mean things about you online, and they're going to, oh no, we're going to get, this is going to happen, or that's going to happen. I say, I don't care. When you're addressing how scrambled everything is, like these young women, they could have looked like $1 million. They could have looked like $1 million if they just tried a little harder. But they didn't want to. And when you think about your own programming around this, well, I was this, and I had that happen, I had this other thing happen. And usually there's some pretty ugly things that have happened in young women's lives, especially now. It's shocking how many women have been assaulted on one level or another that have come through the banquet ball. It's shocking. But what we found is that by appealing to something beyond themselves, and then it grants them an opportunity to kind of stop living in victim or in I'm damaged goods worldview, right? And acting on it. And for a minute, we're like, all right. We're not saying you have to stop believing whatever you want to believe. We're saying for 1 minute, we want you to be this. You put on the clothes, you behave this way, and this is how it works. Now, what we found that was surprising, and this is very surprising, is while it's true that overwhelmingly negative experiences give us an opportunity to attach a story to it, like I'm damaged goods, I'm evil, I'm broken, I'm worthless, all of those things do happen when overwhelmingly negative things happen to an individual, right? Mm-hmm. But then if you give them an overwhelmingly positive experience, then they have to say, I am worthy, I am good, and those two things now come into conflict. Which story, which mythology is going to be your ultimate story? Your ultimate, the myth of Brooke after she's dead, 3 or 4 generations from now. What will it be? Now, this is something that the Greeks worried about all the time. And when you think about the mythology around Jared, or the mythology around Bill Bauer, which was my father, there's a struggle. There's a struggle. Is he a villain? Is he a hero? But no, for me, a lot of what I'm trying to get folks to do is to start seeing themselves as player characters, because a lot of them are just kind of going along. Mm-hmm. In order for them to engage as playing characters in the game of life, if we treated life like a one-shot video game and then you're going to die at the end, right, for real, then you stop behaving in a way that you're a villain or a non-player character. You start engaging in a new way. And in the conversations that I had with young people on the lead up to my first banquet ball, there was a lot of resistance because any time that I talked about the moral imagination, they mistook that for unreality or false reality. Like, truest reality is that life is horrible. Mm. And I'm like, okay, yes, 2 things can be true at the same time. But what makes life horrible is villains. That's usually what makes life horrible. And the truth is that you are a villain. That's Christianity. You are the villain. You are a villain. In order to step out of the villainy that has typified your story, your mythology, your mythos, then you're going to have to step into Christ, crucify your flesh, and then also you're going to have to put on the mind of Christ and get out there and fight evil. And fighting evil is the moral imagination. You are fighting evil when you engage in the moral imagination. So if I say to you, for instance, all right, we need to imagine heaven, and it needs to not be smarmy and ridiculous. That's very hard to do. That's very hard to do. But when you look at some of the greatest works of Western civilization, a couple of them that just come off the top of my head involve doing precisely that. You have Paradise Lost by Milton, right? And then you have what's the one? Divine Comedy. So, in the pursuit, I suppose that this is kind of my point with you guys. In the pursuit of changing your mythology, you have to stop thinking in terms of the utopia on Earth, and instead start realizing that beauty surrounds us if we choose to engage it and cultivate it. And I'm not suggesting that we can't have heaven on earth, but I am arguing that is not possible until the second coming.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then what are we doing here? Well, if I'm engaging folks who are looking for a cause, and by the way, every one of these Antifa kids, every one of these hardcore, psychos, I call them psychos, who are dealing now with extreme narcissism, and we call it gender dysphoria or whatever you want to call it. Those individuals are looking for a cause. They're looking for epic. They're looking for their lives to mean something. And when you come along and say, whatever it is you're excited about is bad, join me in believing in nothing, that's not an answer. You have to come to them with an alternative vision of what the world can be like and how they fit in it. And until you have the capacity to present that with a good, solid sell, then I don't think that you're going to meet with much or any success. You have to have a compelling vision of the world. I mean, Napoleon himself said it's the imagination that rules men. So you have to touch on their imagination. They are imagining a utopia where Christians and the Judeo-Christian ethic is annihilated. That is the utopia that's being presented by some people in our culture, and they control the levers of power at the moment.
Because everybody's looking for the grand adventure. And a lot of people are looking for it to the immoral imagination. Gratifying the lust of the flesh, as you were saying, versus rising to a higher plane that a lot of people don't really know exists.
I agree. And I'm like, hey, have you tried poetry? And they're like, no, poetry is for nerds and snobs. And I'm like, yeah, I agree. Not for Philistines like us, but you got to check out this one. There is one exception. I'm going to go ahead and give you that. And then it's like pulling the string on a sweater, and pretty soon they're like, whoa, this is crazy. Another one is, have you tried wine paired with your four-course meal? No, I've never tried that. I've never done that. Wine is for snobby little snooties, and then like, oh, wait a minute, this is a little bit beyond what I expected. Hey, do you want to go to a banquet and ball? I don't know, man. That sounds like a bunch of snobby, snooty stuff. I'm not going to wear a tux. Tux is for pansies, right?
So it's kind of like developing taste, like the 40-year port. A lot of people
40,
wouldn't appreciate that, but a lot of people wouldn't appreciate the taste for something higher because the default is to go below. That's the wrong word. But
that's a good point. Yeah, no.
to the bottom of the
Below
funnel,
is,
to use
yeah,
that.
to the bottom of the funnel, if we're going to stick with that terrible metaphor.
I want a consistent analogy. That's what I want.
Well, let's talk about film, because you guys are filmmakers, and
Yeah.
What is something that is elegant and beautiful and could be rewatched multiple times, and what's something that can't?
I think Lord of the Rings fits that first category. I think it hits pretty much every mark on that. It's beautiful. It's enjoyable. It can really be rewatched a lot.
I agree.
And it happens to be one of my favorites. It happens to be a lot of people's favorites, or just something they really enjoy.
Have you? I'm sure you have, but do you remember the Pride and Prejudice that was released in theaters that had I can't pronounce her last name.
Keira Knightley.
Yeah.
I've still never seen that one.
I have.
Okay, so I may have seen that more than Lord of the Rings, and it is heartbreakingly beautiful. And I think Godfather Part 2 is heartbreakingly beautiful. And I think that there's these films that will probably transcend time, probably, because of their elegance, how lovely they are. And there's also films that should but might not. One of the films, I consider a film a good film if it makes me cry. Like there's something going on here if it makes me cry. Have you ever seen Boondock Saints?
No.
Okay. Did you cry during Boondock Saints?
The first one I did, not the second.
No, not the second. I cried during the second one because it's so bad. It was a waste
So
of
it's
opportunity.
special in a different way.
All right, so I'm asking somebody off screen. Is another guy. Which part did you cry during Boondock Saints?
I can't say that I cried because I don't really cry during movies in general, unless it's got something to do with like kids being tortured. But Boondock Saints the writing in that movie was just so insane that it's been so long since I've seen it. But that is a movie that I've watched several times over, and it's never lost its
It's verve.
yeah.
Yeah. So there's this point in the movie that gets me every time where. Can I swear?
I mean, there's a child present, but
Yeah, there's two child.
there's two child present.
Two
Okay.
child present. Better not.
I better not. Okay.
Otherwise, we'll have to check the box. It says explicit. Okay.
Okay, never mind. All right. So there's this part. I'm going to try. And the story follows these two Irish brothers and this dad. And then they got this goofy dork friend who's really important. Really, really important to the plot. And he's this Italian goof who thinks he's going to make it in the Italian mafia someday, right? Have you seen Boondock Saints?
No.
Oh, my gosh. You got to watch it.
If you're a fan of Walking Dead, it's got what's his name? Yes,
Yeah.
Norman Reedus is one of the main characters.
Yeah, yeah. So this goofy, Dago is there, and he realizes that they set him up to kill him, and all this stuff happens. Essentially, he's betrayed by the Italians, and he winds up going around with these Irish guys, and he's helping them clean the streets, is what we'll call it. And right at the end, he gets shot, and he falls to the ground, and he turns to him and he says, he basically tells these two brothers that this was what you guys, my life finally meant something thanks to you guys. All right. And it was a surprise for me. It was a twist for me because the whole thing was ridiculous. The whole film was absolutely absurd, but it kicks off where the entire premise of it is that evil triumphs when good men do nothing. It's literally a homily made by a Catholic priest that kicks off the entire thing. These two Irish brothers come in, and their father was a hitman. And so, and I'm saying that to say that like there's these cinematic films that we have engaged in and consumed as Americans, and you'll notice that ever since the wokesters took over around the Me Too movement, Hollywood has been incapable of producing that kind of content. You're not going to get a Braveheart ever until things change. You're not going to get a Braveheart because that speaks to a moral imagination, which is you sacrifice your life for a cause and they torture you to death and then you die. Yay. And that's not what the message that Rey conveys in the latest Star Wars trilogy. And women are to be pursued and treasured and protected. Like that's considered evil now. They call evil good and good evil. And so for me, and this somewhat answers, I hope this answers your question, but for me, as the story is that I'm trying to tell about Jared, and I want my story to be this, I want the legend of Jared to be this. I loved people and I fought evil. And both of those are tangible and measurable. They aren't these vagaries where thoughts and prayers. Like, no, they're trying to destroy the reputation of Jason White because he told the truth and they hated him for telling the truth. So I'm going to get my ass out there. I'm going to put it on the line. I'm going to do everything I can. And when people come along and say, you shouldn't be so close to Jason White, he looks like you're just a fan of Jason White. All you do is talk about Jason White. And I'm like, fuck you. That's my story, because he will not stand alone. We will defend the innocent to the death if necessary. That is going to be the story. That's the legend of Jared. And if you don't like it, I already said it.
Well, it sounds a little bit like the culmination of grit, elegance, and conviction.
I hope so.
We hope so too.
Yeah. Before we cut off here, I know we're pretty much out of time. Do you have any examples for the average listener of how to embody that in their daily life?
This is the most. Oh man, I'm gonna get in trouble for this.
I love it.
Stop going to church. You are giving your time, you are giving your money to an estrogenized institution that has failed to stop abortion, has failed to stop human trafficking, has failed to protect the innocent in any tangible way, and they have empowered some of the weakest little turds you could possibly meet. Second is get married and have kids. You realize the potential of the next generation when you just do the things they tell you not to do. I mean, it's not that hard. I say they, but essentially take a look at them. Take a look at what they say the culture is telling you is going to make you happy. They're lying. They're lying.
Yeah.
Do the things they're telling you not to do. And when they come along and say, you're allowed to do ABC, but don't you dare do this one thing here, then go do that. That's what I did. It was fun. Jared, whatever you do, don't start a church. So I started a church. Whatever you do, don't be involved in politics. Politics it is. Whatever you do, do not. And I'm just going to do it. Now, the people that are telling me not to do this, obviously they're like, don't murder people. I don't plan on murdering people. Right? You need to stay true to the Judeo-Christian ethic, which is thou shalt not murder, honor your father and mother, etc. Do not steal. Don't bear false witness. Protect the innocent is not that hard. It is very low bar. And if you're like, I don't know how to protect the innocent, then get a sign and stand outside of Planned Parenthood. If you want to get the attention of people who hate the innocent, it's not that hard. It is not that hard. And people will come out and they'll manufacture the most absurd lies about you. And you may be surprised to discover that you enjoy the negative attention. You might find out it's kind of your dragon energy. When they come out and they say, Jared, you're running a cult and there's a whole bunch of people who just blindly obey you, I laugh because it's so patently absurd. I have to reconvince everyone every single time, including my wife.
Oh no.
And so if you want to find a place to plug in and get involved, then you need to find a group of people who are willing to disrupt the ordinary. And if you can't find that group, make it. And if you can't make that group, well, then you should get in touch with Kate and Marmar and Brooke. All right.
Is that what we do instead of going to regular churches?
Sure.
Okay.
Start new churches.
The other is something that people, and this is my last point, I promise. People do not understand media and the role of media. Media is, I'm gonna give you my definition. It's not the working definition necessarily, but this is my definition of media: communicating. So when you go out and you start communicating with people, and you're dependent on oh well, I'm gonna stand on a soapbox on a corner, or I'm gonna wave a sign. That's pretty much the lowest bar. Next up is a mass email. If you really want to get somewhere, build your own machine. So YouTube is a machine. You don't own that machine. If you work off that machine, you're subject to their rules.
Yeah.
Same as Twitter, same as any of these social media things. I know for a fact that they're banning people on social media all the time, and they're dragging them down. So don't do that. If you actually want to get ahead, you need to build your own machine. You're the one in charge of delivery. You can't get canceled. If you can get canceled because of some censor guy in an office somewhere, you need to rethink things. Mm-hmm. That's my position. And if you want to communicate with people, really, honestly, it's a flashlight is what you got. And the darkness is the absence of light. So by taking a flashlight and shining it on corruption, shining it on evildoers, or even taking the flashlight and putting it on something that is beautiful and elegant and should be savored, all of those count. Do it. It's fun. I promise.
Yeah. A wise friend once told me that you can only get canceled if you allow it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you fight through it, you won't get canceled. So just stick with whatever it is that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Have conviction and
Yeah.
grit and get through it. And
You can communicate with your hard support.
Yeah. Awesome.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jared. This has been awesome.
You want to edit my F-bomb out later? Or?
That won't be possible. Maybe I could put a bleep over it, but I don't usually do that. I didn't do that with Dan.
Thanks, Dan. It's nice to know I'm not alone.
I set the bar.
No, Gage set the bar. Anyways. Okay.
Not calling anyone out here. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Jared. Yeah, this has been great. Thank you for being on our podcast and sharing with everyone all of that. So,
Yeah.
Until next time.
So much winning.
Yes.
America.